Here's a progress update on Theo's portrait. I had one last sample to stitch before committing to the final piece, an eyeball, because unlike the rest of him, there's no fur to dictate stitch direction here. I started with a stem-stitched outline, and then sort of filled in the surface of the eye with long and short stitches in my chosen colors, trying to recreate the shifts and shadows as faithfully as possible. One trick, for me at least, is that I found it's much easier to start with a mid-shade and then assess highlights and shadows afterwards. This took so many colors, so many parked threads. It was definitely a learning experience. It feels like painting in slow motion, and I went through a whole range of emotions as it progressed, starting with very worried to actually quite surprised that it worked. At this point, I felt like I was finally done testing, but I decided to give myself another challenge. I want Theo's portrait to have more dimension. His round muzzle is one of the features I love the most, so I decided to lay a foundation of wool felt to create a bit of extra depth. I used my tracing of Theo's face to decide which areas to raise up with felt pieces, focusing on his nose and muzzle especially, as well as his brow and forehead, and a little bit of shaping where his ears curve forward at the inner edge. Layer by layer, I stitched the perimeter of each piece of felt down, smallest to largest, with the final layer just inside the complete stitching area. I know this seems like a lot of work for something that's going to be hidden, but I find it oddly satisfying to work on these parts that nobody will see. Once the top layer was on, I basted my guide layer in place. This is drawn on a piece of water-soluble stabilizer. I added lines of backstitching in all the places that had distinct height shifts, but left areas with more gradual slopes alone. And now, finally, after weeks of prep and research and hours of stitching samples and felt padding, I'm ready to take my first stitch.